Everybody, well, welcome. This is a partner webinar series. We're talking about healing with hobbies. So I'm sure you're coming into this with at least some idea of what hobbies might entail, what role they might serve in our lives. And I'm hoping that we can expand on that definition and really understand the full potential that hobbies do have in helping us balance life and the stress that comes with it, all the obligations and the hats that we wear. And hobbies allow us to find that time for ourselves. So before we begin, we need to consider ourselves holistically. We need to really sit down and think about every facet that goes into who we are, all the roles that we have, the relationship dynamics that we maintain. If you're a mother, a father, a son, a daughter, a student, a teacher, a professional, right? Those are a little bit more systemic. And then within that, we can do a thought exercise here to start off to help facilitate that a bit. So I'll read it aloud. Take a moment and consider all the things that make you who you are, all the character traits, the biases, the preferences, the aversions and the passions, all of those individual things that culminate to create your sense of self. So take a second here to consider this thought exercise. If you're just joining, welcome. We're just getting started here. We're going to take a second to consider this here. Consider all of the things that go in. All right, maybe just another moment. Okay. And really, then the question turns to, once we've identified this list of characteristics and little biases or preferences, and I prefer scrambled eggs to over easy eggs, or walking to jogging, right? And even those little things, what is it that reinforces those things in us, that reinforces that sense of, well, that makes me who I am, that helps to contribute to that? It's culmination of a lot of things. Self-talk, the words that we use to ourselves, inside ourselves, schemas that we then develop. Schemas are general understandings of what something is, some structure or construct that we've created through society, like a teacher. You think of a teacher, what is your schema for a teacher? It's sort of what it is that you expect to see when you know you're about to meet a teacher, or what comes to mind when you think of the concept of a teacher. Okay. And they're reinforced, these schemas, by core beliefs. Core beliefs are really, as they suggest, core understandings of the world around us, how we perceive ambiguous things as having some level of meaning to us. Ambiguous meaning that they don't actually have a meaning, but we assign one to it. Core beliefs dictate the lens we see the world through and then interpret those things. Social learning is a big factor. What we're told, what we see, how that interaction is facilitated inside ourselves emotionally, what meaning we pull out of that, and ultimately how we encode that into our sense of self. And being told you are a certain way or you aren't a certain way. Being told that you are artistic or you are not artistic and have no creativity by others. And looking around, seeing how things are done, social learning. Comparisons, comparing ourselves to others, or a lot of times not even a literal other and another ideal, comparing who we are to some idealized version of what we should be, what we ought to be. And then ultimately, access and exposure, because we need access to and exposure to any of these things to really encode them into who we are, right? We don't know what we don't know. We are ignorant of many things that exist that we just have no concept of, and so we can't encode them into our sense of self. So our sense of who we are is reinforced by direct and indirect experiences, ultimately. Your brain is malleable. There is a concept called structural plasticity. These are physical changes in the brain due to learning. So when you learn something, your brain creates a new connection physically through synapses. This connection through when maybe you first were grappling with gravity, and if I had a pen and I let go, it falls, right? That learning process creates a physical connection in the brain. And there's a concept within plasticity and the brain malleability called use it or lose it. Either you're going to continue and repeat doing something, and so that reinforces your understanding of how to do it, or you don't use it and you forget it over time. A lot of times this happens with names. Maybe you can remember a face, but name's not coming to mind because you haven't seen the person in years. Or something that you used to know how to do, a skill that you used to have that you haven't used and now it's gone. It's an example of plasticity working in reverse. That physical structure kind of decaying over time by not getting the nutrients through use, getting that reinforcement. We also learn, and structural plasticity comes into play with failures, which cause aversions, depending on personality characteristics. And aversions can be unlearned. Right? Success and preferences as well. So when we succeed in something, we're more likely to want to try and do that. And within that, we need to really consider how it is that we're measuring success. If we're measuring success through sheer monetary value of me engaging in this thing, right? To put it back in perspective of hobbies, which is what we're talking about here. What if I don't deem, spending my time in this way to be valuable to me because I can't flip it and make money, or my music is never gonna get millions of streams, so why bother? We need to measure or consider how we're measuring success. Preferences can fade and change over time as we grow and as we develop, and we're always changing. So we need to be mindful of who we are in the moment. And we would do that by tapping into an exercise like we did at the beginning, where we sat back and we considered all the things that went into who we are. So how hobbies heal. What can hobbies do for me? Why should I engage in hobbies? Well, on the surface, there's stress relief. A lot of hobbies, when people consider, what they might want to take up, they think, well, I need some separation from my obligations. I need stress relief. Okay. It's a great place to start, especially with, wearing so many hats, constantly in motion. We definitely need time to de-stress. Expanding the definition of self, right? This goes into the self-limiting beliefs and that self-talk that we can have. I'm not this way. I'm not that person. Others, but not me. So we can expand our definition of who we are by engaging in these things, by picking up the guitar. And now I'm a guitar player because I know Smoke on the Water and I learned a song. Reshaping schemas, going into what it looks like to engage in leisure. A lot of times we have these negative associations with leisure, that we should be productive, that I'm selfish for wanting to do this. Reshaping the schema of what leisure looks like. It's not doing absolutely nothing, because taking care of yourself is really, well, allowing you to present a better self to the people that depend on you. Provides low stakes challenges. Take a moment and think about the last time that you had something to do that if you absolutely failed at it, it really wouldn't matter. Paying taxes doesn't seem to work. Paying your bills doesn't seem to work. Even, failing to pick your kid up from daycare or school, can't, if you fail at that, there's some repercussions there too. We don't really have too many low stakes challenges in our life a lot of times. And with hobbies, what happens if you take up woodworking and it doesn't come out how you intended it to? It seems like it's a lesson learned and you move on and try again. And there's really no major repercussion that comes out of that. And we don't get too many opportunities like that because there are a lot of major repercussions in the world. Again, challenging negative core beliefs, challenging those senses of the world, or I'm not creative. Again, in that self-talk, which ultimately determines how we make meaning of the world as well, because these core beliefs are the lens that we see the world through and understand those ambiguous kind of things, like I mentioned earlier. And this last one here, reconnecting with play. If you have infant or a toddler, maybe you're a little bit closer to this, or maybe just a youthful sense of self already, you may have a good connection with play. But kind of into the low stakes challenges idea, when's the last time that you were able to just kind of let loose and relax, and how regular it has that been? So just considerations and things that hobbies can provide for us. So what's the goal? What is the goal with talking about all of this? Is it that I'm going to leave here and I'm going to have 1, 2, 3, 4 hobbies that I'm going to go try this week? That'd be great. But really, the goal is to understand how to build healthy connections with the self. And we have a lot of stress and obligations, and a lot of times our connections with those stressful things, those stressful obligations, they're not healthy. They're under a time crunch, or there's this impending dread of I have to get this done or else, right? So these hobbies allow us to rebuild connections with ourselves in healthy ways. So that's really the goal, is to increase your sense and your understanding of self and allow you to really see where maybe some of these needs lie that hobbies can help address. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to structure hobbies, introduce some examples briefly, but structure them by needs. And I have 3 examples on here, needs that maybe you may have, you may not have, but don't take it literally, take it a little bit more generally in looking at what do I need? Where could I have room for something like this? Where do I see the benefits of this working in my favor? All right, so we're going to start on the left here. The need that this is representing is designated time away from obligations. And we're going to represent that by just the rectangle shape there on the left. See the wire frame of the rectangle. That structure we're going to use to represent the need. Okay, so in the middle, we have the first example. The need is still the same. It's still the same shape, same rectangle. But what we do to fill that need is collage images out of magazines for 30 minutes. All right. Well, it's a hobby, right? Collaging. It's low stakes. If the collage doesn't look good, maybe you don't hang it on the fridge, or it goes in the trash, or you forget about it. It goes in the portfolio and you look back on it in years when you're a collaging phenom, but it's filling the need. Right? The second example, a 2-mile walk around town, taking photos of details every other day. All right, so this one provides a little bit more structure than the first one, right? 30 minutes. It's up to interpretation, 30 minutes daily, 30 minutes as needed. The second one here, a little bit more structured in that this is going to be a 2-mile walk around town. What I'm doing on that walk is I'm taking photos of details. and it's going to be every other day. It's not an everyday expectation or obligation, right? Forming that healthy relationship with it. And if it was every day and that's your preference, it's your preference. The need remains the same, and what you fill it in with is your interpretation. So with this example as well, we should also consider that taking photos of details, right? Walking around town, maybe architectural details or a crack in the sidewalk, or if you're in a more urban area or there's spray paint or something like that, taking pictures of spray paint, or murals. Philadelphia has tons of murals. In that way, engaging in a mindfulness activity as well, because when we're anxious or when we're ruminating on things, what we're doing is we're existing outside of the present, and that's seeping into the moment. So when we engage in something like a mindfulness strategy, like focusing in on the details of the environment, we can bring ourselves out of it. So in this sense, the obligation fulfilling two roles, right? Designated time away, or the hobby fulfilling two roles, designated time away from the obligation, but also some time to de-stress as well with the mindfulness. Our second example here is opportunity to connect with others. Maybe you're sitting there and you're saying, I'd like to be more social. I don't really have as many friends as I'd like, or I'm spending too much time alone. Whatever it is, opportunity to connect with others is what the need is what you're seeking. So it's represented by the wireframe oval. And in the first example, it's filled with roller derby on Sunday afternoon. So this is a pretty regular one right here. This is an example of one that's structured weekly. So a hobby that's structured weekly, and it's opportunity to connect with others, because roller derby is a team sport. You're on a roller derby team. What can come out of that is an enhanced sense of social ability. Maybe your social group grows. In the next example, we have another one that's pretty structured, but structured much further out than just weekly. Book club every third Tuesday of the month. Gives you enough time to read the book, or at least a few chapters. And then you reconvene with the club and you discuss what you read and what your interpretation is of it. And not just opportunity to connect with others, but also structure around what that connection looks like. Because a lot of times just going out and being social can be a little anxiety provoking. I mean, especially as we get into adulthood, maybe social network becomes a little bit smaller, more constricted, or just more preferential. And we're looking around and we're saying, well, I'd like more friends, but I'm not sure exactly where to start. And a hobby geared toward the need of opportunity to connect with others can allow you to address that. All right. So our third example here, a chance to exercise. Chance to exercise is going to be represented by the wireframe triangle on the left. And in the first example, filling it with joining an adult soccer team for monthly games. Okay. So this has two pieces as well. It's a chance to exercise, but it's also kind of similar to the roller derby in that there's a team involved too. And the obligation once a month, okay, that feels fair. It's not weekly, twice weekly, every day. Okay. Chance to exercise and the socializing there. Or maybe chance to exercise, but I want to do it solo. I don't want to do that with other people. Researching a workout routine, tracking progress, you can do that with anything. You can do that with body weight at home. You can do that with just endurance, right? With more long distance things, if you're not trying to work out with weight or anything like that for muscle tone. Or it could look like also getting a gym membership if you don't already have one, and then doing that in the gym. These are open to interpretation and not meant to pigeonhole into what the options are, but more to represent how we recognize what the need is that we have and how we can fulfill that with a hobby. Okay. Keep them in rotation, right? We have more than one need. We will always have more than one need. We always have had more than one need. We've always had the need to breathe and to sleep and to eat and to drink. And so we were born with more than one need. And as we grow and we develop emotionally and spiritually, we continue to expand the number of needs that we have. And so, not that you should fill up all of your leisure time with hobbies, but something like this, right? Roller derby, Sunday afternoon. Okay. It's not Sunday. So, what can I do? Well, all right. Well, I also like collaging. So maybe I'll just sit down and I'll collage because I just need to de-stress. I just need a little bit of time away from work. Was a doozy this week, and I'm just going to take these 30 minutes here. Right. Or I'm not really in the mood to collage. I have this energy. I feel like I was just sitting around. I'm going to go do my workout. Right. And then here comes Sunday, and we keep that rotation going. The idea being when one lacks and there's still a need to be fulfilled, we can fill it with something else. Ultimately, what it comes down to is balance, because, like I said, we're wearing hats. We can't just be in leisure mode. We can't just be in work mode, because you can't give too much in any direction without sacrificing in another. I mean, we're finite. We're limited by our bodies. We're limited by our energy. We're limited by our interests. And as I mentioned in the beginning, we're limited by our access. Okay? I might want to take up horseback riding, but if I don't have access, I have a limit in that way. So, okay, I can't do horseback riding. What is the need? Maybe it's to connect with animals, or maybe it's to be a caretaker. How can I fill that in another way? It is good to rest. It is okay to take a break. If each year lived were a mile, the average person would live approximately 3 consecutive marathons. I think my marathon is 26.2 miles. I have a hard time running 2 miles without taking a break. Now consider running 3 consecutive marathons without a break. It's a long time. And in those opportunities, when we're catching our breath, what are we filling that with? Anxiety to get back in the race? Or are we looking around and we're saying, I need to catch my breath. Let me do something outside of just the obligations. Enhance what it means to be alive and to experience, to fulfill the need of needing a rest or needing to socialize. Allowing opportunity to reconnect with your whole self. Okay? Because that's what we're doing when we're identifying where the need lies. Is we're recognizing, oh yeah, there's a piece of me over here that is just largely being neglected. How can I fulfill that? All right, well, let's see then. It's just, this is going to be a couple lists of just a few examples of hobbies. I'm going to run through them, maybe elaborate on 1 or 2 more. There are a few of them, we'll see. But hobbies by need. So social connection. We have book club, which was mentioned earlier, community gardening, a sports league was mentioned earlier, pottery or art class, okay. Volunteering, okay. Volunteering with the social connection, also with caretaking or nurturing, if there's a need to be a caretaker. Sometimes with volunteering, we can have that fulfilled. Paintball. Paintball is pretty physical. Also, there's a lot of camaraderie. You're on a team against another team. the teamwork involved in coordinating an approach in paintball, right? The kind of tactical mind that goes into moving all of these individual pieces, or a cooking class, to kind of just be in a collective kitchen with other individuals learning to cook pasta by scratch for the first time, or whatever it is for you, souffle, but being able to share that with other people. And it could be that cooking is another interest that you have, right? So again, fulfilling those that two piece there. Exercise, cycling. Yeah, cycling is good. Cycling can be independent. It can also be a community thing, right? You can cycle in groups outside, right? Like a pack of cyclers. You can also cycle inside in a workout class. Walking is another example. They have walking groups, so tying that into the social piece again. And a lot of these with exercise, you can also walk alone. You can walk on a treadmill if it's too cold, or you don't have anywhere really to walk outside. Roller derby, that was mentioned. Dance and bar classes. There's a social piece there too, because especially with the bar classes, there's a lot of stretching involved. And so you have a little bit more time and breathing room to share things with the class. Hiking, I think we associate that a little bit more with small group, more intimate, or even alone sometimes, but still either way. Tennis or pickleball. It seems like tennis is almost obsolete now to pickleball. The pickleball courts going up, but there's a huge social component to tennis as well. If you're doing doubles, or unless you're going against a wall, you always need at least one partner. And if you are going against a wall, there's that maybe fulfilling that need of, well, I'd like to get better at something, and an example of something that you can measure, right? The wall is always going to be consistent, but your missed opportunities, or if the ball flies by, or if you have a bad hit, right, you can measure that and you can see the growth and development over time. Yoga is another example of something that can easily be measured, in the sense that if I try and go ahead and touch my toes now, maybe I can't even reach them, and then after so many months of participating in yoga, now I can put my whole palms on the floor, right? We can really see the growth and development in that, as well as fulfilling the need to exercise. And so there is room for almost a competition between others and also within the self, right? Because with yoga, you can strive to further poses. You can also treat it as just an opportunity to relax and reflect on the day. Creation is actually a need that people have. If we think of procreation, we are creating, and sort of a fundamental need of life. An assertion is the need to consume and to procreate, and really that's across the board in life. Life must procreate to persist, and so it's part of the fundamental nature. In the absence of that, there's a lot of creation that we can participate in that are considered hobbies. Painting, and we're bringing some entirely new image into the world that has never existed before through the medium of taking pigmented oil or water base and putting it on a canvas, or if it's watercolor, on a watercolor sheet of paper. But creating something entirely new that didn't before, and creation could be a need to fulfill. Making music as well. The music didn't exist prior to when it was brought into the world, and here in the world of creation is where we can really run into a wall when we start reflecting on that negative self-talk and those self-limiting beliefs, right? Others, but not me. It couldn't be me. I'm not a creative. I never have been. Where have you heard that before? When has that sentiment been shared with you, and by who? Did you arrive to that on your own? And under what circumstances did you arrive to that conclusion? So making music, painting, woodworking, the act of creation itself serving as the catharsis, the release, the emotional process, rather than just the outcome. Right? Macrame or weaving, knitting or stitch crossing, candle making. These are 5 examples here of bringing something entirely new that didn't exist into the world. And with that, a sort of sense of pride, right? Feeling proud, look what I made. I did this. Right? Photography and videography. Another example of something with significant potential for self-limiting beliefs and self-limiting talk, photography and videography. There is, don't get me wrong, a considerable theory formally behind art. Okay. The act of creation is fundamentally mostly human and a result of culture in terms of art. But taking photos or taking videos, right? What is the ultimate goal of that? Painting, making music. I said in the beginning, you know, if my songs don't get millions of streams, why would I make them? Well, what if the act of creation provided that catharsis, that stress relief, that pride, that sense of having more than just obligations to fulfill? Right? And sort of relinquishing those rigid rules that we put around these things and who's allowed to interact with them. Yeah. So bringing it all together, looking at all of the sentiment and the messages that I've shared so far, and what are we looking at? We're looking at hobbies serving as opportunity for low stakes activity. Okay. Low stakes activity, as I expanded on before, we don't have too much of that in our daily lives. So having the opportunity to engage in something where it's like, oh, the outcome doesn't really matter. It was the process that matters. The time that I took away from all of these obligations with all of their urgency to care for myself, that's what mattered, not the outcome. And in that, a broader sense of self by challenging those self-limiting beliefs, challenging the idea that anybody else but not me, I'm not a creative, or I need to stay busy. I need to continue to prove myself. I need to continue to earn the respect or the position that I'm in socially in employment. Because I can't take this time off, because if I do, then I'm not those things anymore, or they'll be taken away from me, or I'm not proving myself as being worthy of saying that I can be that. And flipping that on its head, right? When we engage in a hobby and we're doing it and we're going strong, let's say I don't know, guitar. I'm playing guitar and I'm learning. I learned 3 new songs in the first month, and then all of a sudden I just stopped. And I lost interest. And I find that that need isn't being fulfilled. I feel it, but I don't want to play guitar, bringing in that idea of having that rotation, right? Sort of a toolkit of these hobbies based on what your need is or what your needs are. And not shying away from going back to the guitar just because maybe you took 2 months away from it. Right? The guitar doesn't have feelings about your hiatus. It's still there, maybe a little dusty, but you wipe it off and you just pick up where you left off. It's our self-limiting beliefs that say, well, I haven't done that. I guess I can't really go back to it. I'm not sure what else to try. You can return to it. But if it's not what you need in that moment, or you have building sort of an aversion to it out of frustration, having that rotation, that toolkit of these hobbies. And holistic fulfillment of needs. Right, in the beginning, we had that thought experiment of what goes into who I am. What are all these tiny details that go into who I am? And I want to invite you to let's go back to that here. Now that we've gone through this, let's go back and let's consider who we are. Character traits, the biases, preferences, aversions, passions. In that, let's also consider the self-limiting beliefs and the negative self-talk that we share with ourselves on the day-to-day. The labels we assign. Let's take a moment here to really think about that. Where we draw that line of what I'm not, or what I couldn't be. Because those also define who we are. And we should also consider the things that we don't want to acknowledge that make us who we are, things that maybe we're a little embarrassed of, and stop and think of, well, where does that come from, right? If I'm embarrassed by how I react to certain things, well, where is that coming from? Again, finding the root, finding the need. Is it coming from, well, I had a long day and I'm burned out and there was traffic on the way home and I sat there for a half an hour laying on the horn and the guy cut me off and now I'm finally here and first thing is an obligation of now I have to clean up this mess and I just snapped. Okay. And so I'm embarrassed about that. And I believe that to be part of who I am. Okay, we should acknowledge that. We should also acknowledge that there's a need in that. The need for an opportunity to separate from all of this mounting obligations, from going from work to professional driver to professional parent to perfect spouse to where's the time for you, right? And carving out that time can be difficult. It absolutely can be difficult, and we need to set boundaries to be able to do that and have clear communication. And really, it goes into establishing and maintaining healthy relationships with yourself, allowing yourself to engage in the hobby, working through any guilt or reluctance to recognize maybe I do actually have 30 minutes right here to do this thing before bed or in between these obligations. Recognizing that, but also the relationship between you and the people around you that are helping to facilitate this sense of obligation or helping to facilitate this sense of having the need met. Right? Communicating what those needs are, not just with yourself, but with others. And we do that directly. We do that with I statements. And I need this. I need 30 minutes to go collage. Right? Because we know that it's not the final product of the collage is what's going to be, oh, I did it. It's the process of doing that. The process of having that 30 minutes where I've shared with the people around me, I need this. And so now I have the opportunity to do it. Right? That clear communication. Establishing boundaries with work obligations. If you spent 8 hours of the day fulfilling obligations in the office and then bringing another 2-4 hours of that home, right? It could be that there's a deadline that needs to be met and there's really no exception. Okay, how are you going to sort of maybe celebrate the completion of that on the back end with something like a hobby to de-stress? Or how are you going to break it up and allow yourself the opportunity to approach it refreshed and not burned out with a sense of reluctance or not wanting to engage with it, an aversion in that way because of feeling burned out, right? Similar to the snap of just getting home and having these problems to fix. Clear communication and clear boundaries. Yeah. And again, with the balance. Can't just give it all up and go play roller derby for 7 days a week, or maybe we can make a living out of it. But for the most part, we do have to find a balance. We do have to find opportunity to be able to fit these things in. So let's take a moment and consider where in the average week there exists maybe 30 minutes of time where you could engage in some level of a hobby based on a need that you have. All right, so there's 2 pieces. First piece, we do need to identify a need. Second piece, we need to identify within the average week where 30 minutes lies. Maybe it's before bed on Thursday, it's just usually works out that everything's done, or maybe it's variable, right? It's here or it's there, but it's not really consistent throughout the week. But I can see, yeah, I do actually have time where I'm maybe just sitting around looking at my phone or doing something that, and maybe that is relaxing, the looking at the phone. But finding that time where it actually lies. And then what is the need? What is the need that you're trying to meet with engaging in something? We talked about stress relief. We talked about connection with others. We talked about creation. Let's think about what other needs might exist for us. And if anybody's here and wants to share a need that in thinking about this, you've been able to arrive to, please come off Zoom and share, or come off mute.
Trev, it's your Aunt Chris. I hate that feeling of nobody asking anything, but my need is to not feel like I have to be in control, because the majority of my day being a teacher, I have to be. So that need, it's like, how do I go about that 30 minutes of not being, just kind of almost being not reckless in a way, but feeling like I don't have to be so regimented. I don't have to, you kind of know what I mean, right?
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. So it sounds like a lot of your day is filled with structure that you've determined. So what is it that would allow you to step outside of that? Yeah, that rigidity of the structure and that control. Yeah, it's a great question to be able to step outside of that, because so many things do have rules, right? There's so many rules about how to play a sport, or how to play a song, for example. Um, if we take a look at maybe these creation pieces here, some of these there's not really rules to, right? And with the photography one in particular, or videography, um, right, it goes into that self-limiting belief of, well, I need to follow this particular structure. This is the way that it's done. And when we allow ourselves to step outside of that, really is when we can engage in sort of that release of control, or that release of that structure. So if the need is to be in control, it sounds like really the need is to find time where I don't feel like I need to be in control. Opportunities to let go of control. Yeah. And we need to consider where that need for control comes from. If it protects against some feeling or some undesirable outcome that we could see as impending without our control. And then to carve out 30 minutes where we can relinquish that. Yeah. That's a great point. Thank you. So again, low stakes activities, broader sense of self, challenging self-limiting beliefs, and a holistic fulfillment of needs, because we are expansive and we are ever changing. Right? Who you are today is not the exact same person as who you were even yesterday. And sometimes even moment to moment, we can change, maybe not fundamentally, but in how we perceive things or our understanding of something. So keeping these up to date and reevaluating, what are my needs now? And because we can do this today, and in a year, completely different circumstances. Maybe my needs are completely shifted. Maybe they started out with building a sense of community or socializing, and now I feel like I'm good on that, but just have all these obligations. I can't seem to find the time for just me. So it would be the social piece, setting the boundaries. I need time for me, as well as setting the boundaries for yourself, carving out that time for me. There's barriers that can go up and prevent us from being able to do this successfully. And a lot of times the control does come into play. Yeah, absolutely. That need to stay, on guard or aware of what's going on, or being able to better predict what's going to happen, or just generally being more comfortable when we are in control. Because we all do have a need for control in some capacity. And if you've ever been in an environment where your voice isn't heard, you have a strong opinion, strong conviction, and you think it's the answer to what's being discussed, or it's a genuine concern among trusted others, and you share that, and it's unheard, squashed, shut down. That feeling is not just being unheard, but also having our sense of control over what the outcome is dampened. Everybody to a degree needs that. And to be able to separate from it, to relinquish that, have these opportunities. It can come in the form of a vacation. Right? And maybe vacation is a way of framing travel, which we could better consider to be a hobby. I travel. Okay, but maybe you do need a vacation sometimes to be able to relinquish control. You need to travel. Right? All right. Well, I want to, in the last 10 minutes here, first of all, conclude. Thank you all for joining. And I want to open up just conversation or short little like Q&A for any clarification, or just if you want to expand on any ideas or share anything that came up for you during our time here. So you can just come off mute. I'm going to come back into Zoom here and we can stop share. All right. So hi, everybody. Thanks for joining. Like I said, if you have anything that came up for you, if you want any clarification on anything that we talked about tonight, now would be the time to share or ask.
Hey, Trev, I have a question.
Yeah.
So I know the self-talk thing for me is something that's really big, right? And it's something that, can bring me down, and, then I'm stuck in this state of, woe is me, almost like a victim, right? So, I mean, what are your recommendations around that self-talk to help pull somebody out of it quicker so they can get to a point where they're looking for those opportunities for those 30 minutes to really enjoy the things that they want to do?
It's a good question. So let me make sure, first of all, I'm understanding this. So it sounds like what you're saying is that the self-talk can kind of lessen the motivation to engage with some of the things that could bring you out of that.
Yeah, because the self-talk can sometimes, put me in a bad place, maybe headspace wise, which gets me then overthinking, which then does not motivate me to go and do maybe the thing and find new experiences.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. And where something like one of the more structured hobbies can come into play, right? Something with a clear date that we mark on the calendar and we say every third Tuesday of the month, we're going to go to book club. That can sort of act as a predictable sort of regular thing where it's like, all right, I don't have to think too hard about it. It's already pre-planned. I just go do it. Right. And so in that way, it can be different than something that is a little bit more spontaneous of trying to find, here's 30 minutes, but I don't feel the motivation. Right. Because I see what you're saying, right? If we are down with the self-talk, and we don't have the motivation to go out and engage with this thing for 30 minutes, this whatever it is for you, chances are we're not going to do that. So definitely see what you're saying. And I think what can address that is the more structured, things with time frames. Does that answer?
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Trevor, I think that's a great point, because one thing I noticed about myself that I've discussed before is that there's certain times where, if I've have a absolutely just annoying, frustrating day, I really do not feel like engaging in any other activity. I just want to kind of just sit there. And I have found that if I force myself to engage in that activity, so like what you're talking about is having that structure in place to say, do it at this time, do it on this day. But I found that when I force myself to engage in that activity, it sort of eliminates all of that frustration. And I'm just now, I'm kind of like involved in it. And I've sort of just arrived there without realizing I arrived there. So I like the idea of that schedule, just forcing yourself to do something.
Right, because what's happening is as you're transitioning from the thing that was causing, maybe it sounds like stress. Oh, I have hearts. As you're moving from that thing that was causing that stress to now the hobby, the hobby should be fulfilling the need, right? That we were identifying what the need is that we have, and it sounds like the need was to engage in something that isn't an obligation, that isn't met with this time crunch or these things that have to get done, right? And so now you're able to, maybe you weren't necessarily motivated to do it, but now that you're in it, the process of doing it is serving the need, allowing you that time and separation to engage in something completely different that is enjoyable to you because, well, you should be filling it with something that's interesting to you. So yeah, thank you for sharing. Anybody else care to share their thoughts or any clarification on anything that we talked about tonight? Oh, thank you. Thank you, Lachey. Yeah, I'm glad that maybe you have a few new options. I didn't include too much of a comprehensive list of, here's a ton of hobbies. I would maybe suggest go into Google, like literally go into Google and type in whatever the need is, and then hobbies, relaxation hobbies, or exercise hobbies, and you're going to find long lists and blogs, and you're going to be able to just maybe get a better sense of what some of the options are. What I thought was the most important to stress here was the relationship that we have with hobbies is fulfilling some need, right? The hobby should fulfill the need, not just engaging in something for some reason. Why? And then, then going on from something that is interesting to you, which maybe you could find in one of those many lists or blogs. But yeah, thank you very much. And I think this just about concludes our time here, unless anybody had any closing remarks or anything like that. All right, great. Well, thank you all very much for coming out and, well, tuning in, really. And I hope you take care.